You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about sports in the state of Michigan?
You can't handle the truth!
Well, we're giving you the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast on Stables Media, the show that provides research and statistics about all the Detroit and Michigan sports teams, whether fans like it or not, and detects, exposes, and reveals actual and hidden facts and truth that the mainstream media doesn't want you to know. No junk, no entertainment, no homerism, no slappiness, no coddling, no pop culture, no conspiracy theories, no opinions, no shilling, and no fluff. Head over to our website, the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast.com. Follow us on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at Michigan_Truth, and like and share our verified Facebook page, the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast. Also listen to us on Spreaker, CastBox, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts via iTunes, and Spotify, and like Stables Media on Facebook. The Michigan Sports Truth Podcast does not represent or defame any of the teams it covers, nor does it represent or compete against any mainstream media in the state of Michigan. It is also not for entertainment or debating purposes. It only detects, exposes, and reveals honest, actual, and hidden truth, facts, and statistics about them. And it is for every sports fan's own good because the truth is out there. And welcome to another episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast on Stables Media. I'm Taylor Phillips along with Ed Smith and Frank Basner. Let's kick this off with our opening statement. Ed, we'll start with you and then we'll go to Frank and then I'll come up with one. Ed, your turn. You go first.
My opening statement for this week is that it's good to get a good crash course in recognizing and realizing why the Tigers are in the state that they're in right now, and recognizing and realizing that things may not be quickly on the horizon because of who's currently in charge now compared to what it was then.
Right. Frank, opening statement.
My opening statement for this week is we're finally seeing how much of a clown show is in Ann Arbor, Michigan in regards to whether or not Jim Harbaugh gets extended, especially after the press conference that Ward Manuel held yesterday. And it's not just the fact that the big game against Ohio State is canceled. I'll explain in detail later.
My opening statement, the NHL is going to return, but I just don't understand why the Red Wings and Bolts and Panthers, the Lightning, are still in the same division, except in a quarantine division. But I'll get to that later. We'll talk Tigers, Red Wings, NHL, Lions, Spartans, and Wolverines football and basketball, and then we'll do 5 questions. First time in a long time. We need to do this more often. But before we get started, we want to remind everyone to download the all-new social sports app called VigIt, which influences more and more people to love sports. Enter the referral code STABLES with a capital S and a letter B in the middle. Download the VigIt app and sign up with the referral code STABLES with a capital S and the letter B in the middle. Available on the App Store, on Apple, and Google Play. A new DSR article popped up earlier this week. Oh, the Poor Billionaires, written by Jeff Moss of the Detroit Sports Rag this past Monday. It was about Tigers beat writer Chris McCoskey from the Detroit News, tweeting on Twitter at @CMcCoskey, quote, "For those bitching about the Tigers' patient, opportunistic approach to free agency, if you owned a store and had no idea if or how long you'd be able to keep it open next year or how many customers would be allowed in, would you fill shelves with the most expensive items?" Unquote. Now, this is a figure of speech by Chris McCoskey. He wants the Tigers front office to, including general manager Al Avila, to sign more product talent to long-term expensive contracts the way Ken Holland used to do. Now, here are the details of this article that Jeff Moss wrote in that article. The Ilitch family's net worth was north of $6 billion since Mike passed away. Their primary business is Little Caesars rather than the sports teams they own that we love. They also took $324 million in public funds from a bankrupt city to build a hockey arena, which is Little Caesars Arena, with the promise of rejuvenating Midtown with commerce and housing developments that never materialized. Contracts with Miguel Cabrera, Prince Fielder, and Jordan Zimmerman were expiring. Thank goodness Prince Fielder's going to be off the hook soon. Chris Ilitch hired Matt Shepard to do play-by-play for the Tigers on what is still for now Fox Sports Detroit. The city of Detroit was provided by hundreds of parking lots and a restaurant owned by Bob Ritchie, who christened Little Caesars Arena with several concerts, and Chris Ilitch is still known as the parking lot king. And finally, star players like Justin Verlander, J.D. Martinez, and Justin Upton had already been dealt, and rookies/prospects such as Casey Mize, Matt Manning, and Tariq Skubal still have yet to develop into MLB caliber. Now, to recap this as we go to Ed and Frank, Yes, the Tigers need to add more product talent to their product roster, but is general manager Al Avila going to sign anyone to an expensive long-term contract like Ken Holland used to do when he was the Red Wings GM? I don't know if that's a good idea. Ed, we'll start with you. Go ahead.
Well, there's a lot of things to tackle and pinpoint and go about and come over with this article. First and foremost, let's start up with the obvious fact. The Tigers, in the midst of this 4-year rebuild, they've had seemingly no payoff. When you consider the fire sale that they went through in 2017, getting rid of Justin Verlander and getting rid of the guys that was mentioned, Justin Upton, J.D. Martinez, Justin Wilson, Alex Avila, Joaquin Soria, amongst others. It was just a massive burn down the house, salt the earth type of deal. You would think by at least this point, no, we weren't expecting championship contender, but we were at least expecting relative middling success where, you're actively competing for the division, at least something to that effect. Not when you're the bottom of the bottom, having the worst record in the league twice in that span. Now you're going on your third managerial hire, and you're seeing revenue fall down, you're seeing attendance fall, you're seeing payroll fall, and that is mainly because of what the ownership has become. It went from high risk, high reward to minimum risk, the least amount of risk possible, and at the end, the product is suffering because of it. So that's one thing. Another thing here is again, back to Chris Ilitch being the cheapskate that he is. There's a reason why I've called him Cheapskate Chris. Anyone who's paid attention to the show over the years is because it seemingly he does not care at all about accelerating a rebuild at any point in time. If that was the case, the Tigers would have already had at least a couple of worthy, one or two decent level players on not such a ridiculous contract. Okay, they wouldn't be at the point of where they're at right now, where, they may have some solid players that they drafted, but that's it. You're still waiting 2-3 years down the line for them to start bubbling up and reaching their own potential. So when you say that they're not accelerating the rebuild, that's the reason why. And consider the fact of this, right? 2003, they finished with 119 losses. Mike Ilitch didn't even wait to try and fix this. He went out and got Pudge friggin' Rodriguez and Maglio Ordonez, and then a piece here, a piece there. 3 years later, they're in the World Series. And they were contending for 8 years straight after that, and were still in okay relative shape until Mike died. So what have we seen under Chris Ilitch? Complete and total opposite, and it's been worse ever since as a reason why. And now it brings me to my third point, which is the media itself, not holding guys like Chris Ilitch accountable. I'm talking about right here. Forget about national. Let's talk about right here in our own little hubbub in Detroit sports. I've yet to see the local Detroit sports media hammer out and go after these guys and these owners and this ownership the way that they would do a bad coach or renegade player or someone that did this. I've yet to see them do that. Why? Because fear of retaliation, fear of being blackballed, or your revenue or your resources being cut out of retaliation, petty retaliation. So what? The fact that you've been essentially as media kowtowing for these owners is the reason why these teams are at the state that they're in. 2005, Detroit Lions fans were beyond done with Matt Millen. If the media had just been as persistent then, as the fans were, at least close to the level the fans would not have to wait an additional 3 years to see Millen fired, okay? When you are in a media center like New York, you can be the Brooklyn Nets to where you make a horrific deal in 2013, yet 7 years later, you are standing on the precipice of being considered a title contender because now you have two of the best players in the game, and you have an exciting new head coach, and yada, yada, yada. That's an example of an accelerating of a rebuild, number one, and number two, not having the media kowtow to these owners saying, oh, you're doing such a good job, blah, 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 when in reality, you're not. So those are my 3 points that I have that remind me of this article, and it really speaks to me of how far off the Tigers have fallen ever since the reins were passed down from Mike to Chris. And it's really
I know. Frank, it's been the same story throughout the years, so go ahead and lay down the hammer on that media.
Well, I'm just going to say that this article was a reason why I have said Chris Ilitch is one of the worst owners in all of sports. And I put him at the same table as James Dolan, Vivek Ranadive, and other inept idiots who own sports teams. The guy doesn't want to spend any money. He's polar opposite of his dad, as Ed mentioned. And of course, what really disgusts me, and I know Ed alluded to this as well, the media doesn't hold him accountable. They just all like to kiss his butt and say, oh, he's doing great, and this, that, and the other. There's a lot of things I'd like to say about him right now, but I can't repeat them here. But I'll say this. If this was anywhere else in the country, I mean, Ed mentioned New York. How about Los Angeles? Or I'll even use Canada for an example. In Toronto, the media up there, if something goes on with the Maple Leafs, not just if ownership there gets grilled about it day in and day out until they get an explanation to them. Here, doesn't happen. If only the media in Detroit that covers all 4 sports teams was like the Canadian hockey media, we wouldn't be having a lot of these problems.
No, could you imagine a scenario where, let's say, the Ottawa Senators or the Calgary Flames take over $300 million in public money from the city, whether or not the city went bankrupt or not. Lord. And at the end, you promise them all these pie-in-the-sky dreams of fancy lights and the district's going to be replenished and flourish. And in the end, you get a bunch of empty-ass parking lots and empty-ass seats.
Yeah, and that's a good comparison to Chris Ilitch's District Detroit project.
Exactly. That's the point I made. That kind of crap would not fly in any of those markets. But yet here, it gets a free pass.
Right.
That's a church.
I had to take HBO exposing this piece of garbage for who he is for the media to take even a glimpse of a notice. And then they just promptly swept that under the rug as well.
Right. It's just stupid. Getting a free pass for what? Loyalty? I mean, come on, really? Ugh. So, speaking of the Tigers, they lost pitcher Anthony Castro, who was claimed off waivers by the Toronto Blue Jays, and then the Tigers hired Jose Cruz Jr. as an assistant hitting coach. And this is his first spot on a big league coaching staff. We're going to do the What's Your Grade segment right here. Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Frank. Ed, what's your grade on Jose Cruz Jr. as an assistant hitting coach?
My opinion on Jose Cruz as Jr. as a hitting coach is, it's quite interesting, trying to say the least. Hold on one second.
Okay, yeah.
For some reason, it's like my notes are freezing for some reason. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I can't explain, though. If I think I got something up here. I can at least say that the connection to A.J. Hinch is one thing, because I believe they worked together as one of his assistants when Hinch was in Houston. So that alone makes sense. Yes, it is his first stint as a major league coach, but he has connections, not just with A.J. Hinch, but also the fact that his son, Trey Cruz, was drafted by the team. So, it's a little bit of a back scratch deal, but I think Hinch knows what he's doing in terms of bringing this guy along. So I'm going to say B- for now.
All right. Frank, what's your grade on Jose Cruz Jr. as an assistant hitting coach?
I'm going to go B- as well for pretty much the same reason Ed said. I mean, you got some familiarity with A.J. Hinch. They've worked together in the past. So, I mean, yeah, it's going to be a much bigger deal having a major league hitting coach job, but, you never know how you're going to do until you actually get a chance. So, B-.
All right. I'll go with B- as well. You guys get the same grade, so B- from all of us on Jose Cruz Jr., but we'll see what goes down the road, and then we'll grade him again one more time. Let's go to some hockey now. It has to do with our Red Wings, too, but it's more of a national note, but very big. NHL players and owners and the league have agreed to a 52 to 56 game regular season, except their division alignments are going to be different. They got the Canada division, the Calgary Flames, Edmonton Oilers, Montreal Canadiens, Ottawa Senators, Toronto Maple Leafs, Vancouver Canucks, and Winnipeg Jets. And then they got the other 3 divisions, which are U.S. Now, looking at the other 3, the Tampa Bay Lightning and Florida Panthers are going to be in the same division with the Detroit Red Wings again, which I don't understand why. I know this is the rivalry thing, but except the Red Wings and Lightning are not a rivalry. The Red Wings and Panthers are not a rivalry either. That's the thing that Gary Bettman and the league keep missing. Now, this is why I've come up with 2 NHL quarantine division alignment concepts. Number 1, the Canada division is perfect, and so is the West division. So I'm going to narrow it down to the 2 other divisions, which are East and Central. I'm going to list them on my own. That's number 1. My East division consists of the Boston Bruins, Florida Panthers, New Jersey Devils, New York Islanders, New York Rangers, and Philadelphia Flyers, and Tampa Bay Lightning and Washington Capitals. The Central division, the Buffalo Sabres, the Carolina Hurricanes, the Chicago Blackhawks, the Columbus Blue Jackets, our Detroit Red Wings, Nashville Predators, Pittsburgh Penguins, and St. Louis Blues. Now, at least a couple of rivalries are split up. But that's why I've come up with division alignment concept number 2. Hear me out on this one. The Canada and West divisions stay the same, but it's going to be the Central and Atlantic. The Central will consist of the Boston Bruins, Buffalo Sabres, Carolina Hurricanes, Chicago Blackhawks, Columbus Blue Jackets, Detroit Red Wings, Nashville Predators, and St. Louis Blues. The Atlantic Division will consist of the Florida Panthers, New Jersey Devils, New York Islanders, New York Rangers, Philadelphia Flyers, Pittsburgh Penguins, Tampa Bay Lightning, and Washington Capitals. So that brings all the rivalries together. So we're going to go with Ed and then Frank on this one. So guys, what do you think?
Actually, I think either scenario from your end, Taylor, would not be too bad. I think you can even find a way to make work around the first scenario, because remember the whole stink of that. Well, not stink, but remember when Big Ten, once they added Nebraska, they went through the realignment and everything. They had to split up into divisions. You know, they were worried about certain rivalries, certain games. People were worried about certain rivalries not being protected. That's why they created, you know, the cross-divisional games to protect certain rivalries. For a while, they had Michigan and Ohio State in different divisions, for example. And I could see a scenario to where that with this realignment, like, for example, Pittsburgh not being in the same division with either Philly or Washington just seems insane. But when you consider the fact that the city of Pittsburgh is much closer to the Midwest than it is the East Coast, I get that. But also, the caveat being, if you implement a little clause or protection or say, listen, no matter what, throughout the season every year, Pittsburgh will have one or two designated teams for cross-divisional games. And right there, you can pinpoint, okay, we'll give you the Flyers, we'll give you the Caps. There you go. You keep those two rivalries pure and simple. And then with your second scenario, it's even more simple either way, which, by the way, reminds me, harkens back of the pre-realignment when we saw Chicago and Detroit and St. Louis all in the Western Conference. Granted, these were considered Eastern teams, but they were playing along in a seemingly considered tougher conference, which is why another reason I felt the Red Wings dynasty got the respect it deserved, because when you consider the teams and the conference that they had to go through year in and year out over that decade-plus span, it's impressive that they got 4 cups and almost got a 5th out of that. So that's one thing. And also the point between all this, knowing that the realignment really put a big damper on the Red Wings-Blackhawks rivalry, it would be very nice, in my view, and I'm sure in a lot of others' view, to see that kick back up again. When that happened, when they split after the 2013 playoff series, it went dead faster than Wings Avs. Now, granted, different scenario, but the general point speaking, this was a hard-fought, brutal, long-talked-about storied rivalry that just immediately went by the wayside when it didn't have to. So bringing that back, the Chicago Blackhawks Detroit Red Wings rivalry, I think that would be one big plus positive I would like to see happen if they were to go around the route of realignment once again.
Yeah, definitely. Frank, your turn.
Well, Taylor, I do have to say that the NHL needs to contact you when it comes to making up these divisions. So
Definitely.
Just wanted to throw that out there.
I've been trying to reach them.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I think your second proposal is much better because, for one, the NHL, they market the hell out of whenever the Penguins and Capitals play each other. Same can be said for when the Penguins and Flyers play each other. I mean, there was no way they were going to split those teams apart in different divisions, because that would have just killed ratings, and provided fans do get to return, killed revenue as well. So now I get the Wings being in the same division as 2 Florida teams. Yeah, I wasn't a fan of that when they had the new realignment come back in 2013. But what I am very excited to see is the Red Wings and Blackhawks being in the same division. A number of years ago, when I was doing some writing on the Red Wings, when they had moved to the Eastern Conference, I remember writing a piece that said, what's going to happen to the rivalries? Is there going to be a rivalry that has the tradition of a rivalry with the Blackhawks? Or maybe it brings back some of the venom and hatred of the rivalry with the Colorado Avalanche, even though that one has since gone the way of the Buffalo. I mean, getting Detroit and Chicago back, hopefully this will be a sign of the NHL. This needs to stay together. Keep Detroit and Chicago in the same division. 2 original 6 teams who have a long history of playing each other. You can't separate that, because once you split them up, everything just kind of went down the tube, as Ed mentioned. So hopefully this will be a sign that they keep it together and keep it going in the future. Whether or not they do, only time will tell.
Yeah, definitely. So that takes care of Red Wings and the NHL. Now we go over to the Lions. 2 notes, actually 3 notes before we recap their win against the Bears. Michigan lawmakers are urging the Lions to hire Robert Saleh as their next head coach in a bipartisan letter. And then CBS Sports reports that former New York Giants general manager Jerry Reese is a candidate for Detroit's next general manager. Jerry Reese won 2 Super Bowls with the Giants, one of them which was in the 2007-2008 season when they spoiled the New England Patriots' undefeated season. He succeeded another former GM, Ernie Accorsi, who is also a potential advisor to the GM position. And then sources say that Reese is still interested in returning to the NFL in the executive branch department. And then prior to the game, headline number 3, the Lions waived wide receiver Marvin Hall to give some younger players a look. That would be a reasonable move by the Lions. So we're going to go to Ed and then Frank. Ed, are Robert Saleh and Jerry Reese good choices?
I would say for head coach, I don't want to give away too much. I don't know if that should be considered a 5 questions type of deal in terms of head coach. But I will say, in terms of general manager, I got to be honest, after the Bob Quinn experience, I don't want to see another attempt to try to recreate a culture or do this or do that or recreate another franchise's or another team's success from yesteryear when we're in the here, we're in the now, we're in the future. It's time to start thinking that way. In terms of who I think that general manager could be, listen, I know Matt Derry was bringing up Louis Riddick. Yeah, I'm going to take that with a grain of salt. I think it's just a wait and see approach. I know it seems like the hot shot thing to do, but yeah, it doesn't speak to me as well. If any of you guys have a welcomed general managers, because it seems like the team keeps swinging and missing on these choices as of late. It seems like no matter who they pick, it's just going to bottom out anyway. So it almost seems to think, what's the point in regards to thinking who's going to be the next general manager? As for head coach, I think Robert Saleh does bring a lot of good potential, a lot of good resume, does a lot of strong background familiarity with the state of Michigan. He's a son of Dearborn. He went to, he attended Northern Michigan. He went to not went to MSU, but he was a defense assistant for a couple years in Michigan, at Michigan State. So that speaks for itself. I think that was under John L. Smith, I believe. He has done numerous years as, whether it be a defensive assistant, defensive intern, or some type of defensive coach as well, to now the point where San Francisco 49ers, and when you see players like Richard Sherman, of all people, that which, by the way, speaks high regards to what a lot of players may think in the league of him. But when you have Richard Sherman praising Saleh the way he did this past week, whatever, knowing that this is a defense that went through the injuries that they had this year alone, losing multiple guys, going through ups and downs, and yet he's still, in the words of Sherman, he's finding a way to rally them up. He's being a leader of men. That's the guy you want in your head coach. We didn't get any of that in Patricia. So if we can get a guy who is the opposite of Patricia, at least in one aspect, I'm good on that. So if you're telling me that's going to be a Robert Saleh, cool. If he's going to tell me he's going to be another guy, it could be Brian Doblin or some of the case may be. But as long as we don't try to clone another franchise, I'm good. And no, that also means no Urban Meyer, no Jim Harbaugh, and for the love of God, no Jason Garrett.
Right, no Jason Garrett. Frank, your turn.
Well, I will kind of reserve my feelings on the head coach because that could be a potential 5 questions deal. I will say this about Robert Saleh. He is someone who I think very highly of as a defensive coach, and I fully believe he is NFL head coaching material. And, of course, as Ed mentioned, he is a Dearborn native. He played his high school football at Dearborn-Fordson, and he grew up a Lions fan, so he experienced a lot of the misery that we have all experienced as well. So take that for what it's worth.
Added bonus for you, Taylor. Sorry, Frank, but added bonus for you, Taylor. You even coached at Central Michigan for a year.
Yeah, fire up chips. Frank, continue.
Now, as for the GM, I am going to say a hard no to Jerry Reese. Now, I know people are going to say that he won 2 Super Bowls. Now, granted, I will acknowledge that he did do that. But the time after the second Super Bowl, you have to look at differently than the time where he won 2 of them. Because his draft picks after winning the second Super Bowl were not good. I'll throw some names out there for you, for guys he drafted. David Wilson was a bad pick. Eric Flowers, bad pick. Eli Apple, bad pick. There were plenty of them. And plus, he just never seemed to get things going right with the roster construction of the team, and he kind of kowtowed to Eli Manning, even when Eli was way past his prime. That's just what I think about him. And bringing in a retread who has not been employed for at least a couple of years, I don't think that's a good move, because then you're going to want to try and, like Ed said, you'll try to recreate a culture that worked at least 10 years ago, but now isn't going to work in this day and age. And how many times have we seen the Lions do that? Oh, we're going to run the West Coast offense with Steve Mariucci that the 49ers ran. The Niners ran it 15 years beforehand. And then you bring Mike Martz in to run your offense. We're going to run the greatest show on turf. The Rams did that at least 7 years before you brought Martz in. And then, of course, with Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn, we're going to do things the Patriot way. Yeah, that's kind of been going on for a long time. And it can only work with one Bill Belichick in charge, not Matt Patricia, who, if we're honest, wasn't that good in New England.
It also helps that you have a Bob Kraft instead of a Ford family, and a Tom Brady who, instead of as much as I love him, instead of a Matthew Stafford.
Exactly. Yeah, that would have happened better than the Patriots did, because they won multiple Super Bowls as we know it today. So, yeah, that made me redo question 3 in our 5-question segment, which we'll get to before the end of the show. So the Lions came back from down 10 in the end to beat the Chicago Bears 34-30 at Soldier Field, making interim head coach Darrell Bevell 1-0 as an NFL head coach, lifetime. They came back from down 10, like I just mentioned, with a quick drive to the end zone, a forced fumble by Romeo Okwara and recovered by Robert Penasini, and an Adrian Peterson touchdown to give them the lead with over a minute and a half remaining, a minute 37 and a half remaining to be exact. Their defense came up with the plays only when it mattered down the stretch, but other than that, in totality, they still gave up 30 points, all of which beforehand. Matthew Stafford didn't do too shabby, 27 of 42 for 402 passing yards, 3 touchdown throws, and 1 stupid interception into traffic. He completed great passes to Marvin Jones Jr., Danny Amendola, TJ Hawkinson, and Jesse James, who caught a touchdown pass. Even wide receiver Quintez Cephas made his first NFL touchdown reception from 49 yards out. The game was tight the whole way through. The offense somehow kept the Lions in the game. They improved to 5-7 and are still in the hunt for the postseason, and they overcame the absences of DeAndre Swift, Kenny Galladay, and Jeff Okudah. Now, as we head over to Ed and Frank again, the truth is the Lions may still be in the hunt after witnessing that they're not tanking for any quarterback prospect such as Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields, but I just don't think they'll make the playoffs either if anyone's ever considering that. Ed, you go first. Go ahead.
Yeah, they're basically putting them potentially in another limbo spot where they'll finish, 7-9, 8-8. They'll miss the playoffs, and then they won't get a top 10, top 5, top 10 draft pick.
Right.
So that's one aspect already that's putting them up a creek without a paddle. But as for the Bears game itself, we have to talk about the fact that Chicago essentially gift-wrapped this win to them. I know it's a win. You never want to poo-poo it or downgrade it, but come on now. We were down by 10 points with 5 minutes to go. Stafford had thrown an absolutely soul-crushing backbreaker of an interception, which, as I can, as much as I try to defend him on everything else he does, I can't defend that one. That was just not a good play by him. And he knows it. You saw his reaction, his frustration, his body language after he made that play. He knew he goofed up. Fortunately for him, it was not the game-ending mistake that we all thought it would be. That was going to come later on the other side. But can you consider the fact that the Bears take a sack on 3rd down with 5 minutes to go? The defense then allows Stafford and the Lions to go down the length of the field and get a score with some time still on the clock. And yet, for some reason, the Bears, on a 3rd down, coming out of the 2-minute warning, instead of just running the football and either burn clock or forcing the Lions to burn a timeout, you instead drop back pass, and of all people, you trust Mitchell Trubisky with the game on the line. You deserve that sack fumble. You deserve the ensuing Adrian Peterson going man ball on you touchdown. And then you deserve the subsequent drive in which you somehow step out of bounds 1 yard short and you have an absolutely pathetic play call on 4th down and 1. That essentially was the death knell for your season if you're Chicago. So I've got to talk about that because that was a hilarious, albeit incredibly impressive collapse down the stretch. That's something we have seen the Lions perfect for many a year and generation. So it was good to see, at least for once, the other way happen around. It was nice also or noticeable, I should say, that the players had a much different energy this time around concerning being around Darren Bevel than they would have had at any point, it seemed, around Matt Patricia. I think that goes without saying. It does not need any further explanation. It's rhetorical at this point. But again, it circles back to my point about, are you conflicted about draft stock where, because you see other teams ahead of you. The Vikings could fall off at any time. The Cardinals are vulnerable now. And the Chicago Bears, a team that started 5-1, they're now 5-7. So to say that this season is over, they have no shot at making the playoffs, as painful it may sound to those wishing for a tank, it's just not out of the question at this point. And we have never, players on this team, they don't like to be called quitters or thrown it in, especially if you're Matthew Stafford. I don't think we've ever accused Stafford of, calling it a day or, not giving it his all or, just saying I'm not feeling it unless he absolutely 100% physically was unable to do so. You saw how much it killed him standing on the sidelines when his back literally couldn't go anymore. So I don't think, knowing the competitor Stafford is, he wouldn't purposely throw in the towel mentally just to quit on his team like that. So that's one aspect working for you. But again, knowing full well that you have two surefire all-time potential prospects coming up in this upcoming draft, knowing that this is your chance, another chance potentially cut bait. Again, a harsh term to use, but a term that needs to be said here. Because at this point, if you're Matthew Stafford, you have to consider, at least briefly for a moment, consider having that come to Jesus talk with Sheila Ford and the rest of the Ford family and saying, hey, listen, this is going to be it for me here. I want to keep playing football. But as much as I love it here, my wife may love it here, my kids love it here, and I appreciate everything that this state has done for me and my family, more ways than one, it's time for me to move on. I know Stafford won't say that publicly, but I think at this point he needs to start thinking that privately. And then, like I said, if it comes to it, have that come to Jesus talk with Sheila, Martha, and the rest of the family, let them know, listen, I love you guys. Thank you so much for 11 years. You brought me into the league. You gave me a chance. You believed in me. The fans love me, all that, but it's time to move on.
Yeah, nobody lasts forever in this life. And the Bears showed a lot of stupidity in this game, more than enough for them to lose the game to the Lions. Frank, go ahead. Your turn.
There's a couple of ways I can look at this. One way is say that this was your typical SOL win when they have a chance to lose out, tank, get a better draft position, and then a win spoils it. But I'm not going to go down that road. I mean, am I disappointed that they've fallen now to the top 10 for drafting? Yes, but they also have 4 very difficult games remaining that they could lose all 4 of them, and who knows, they may end up back in the top 10. But anyways, sticking to this game, I would say that the Bears out-lioned the Lions with a lot of dumb mistakes that we've seen the Lions do in the past. Like late turnovers that lead to go-ahead scores, or blowing double-digit leads late, or drop-back pass and third down, under 2 minutes to go when you should be running the football. And the one that has to top them all off is Allen Robinson going out of bounds before he reaches the first down. Where have I seen that before, or something similar?
Not too often.
I'm getting Roy Williams flashbacks for some reason.
Yes.
Could have turned it upfield.
Yeah, yes, again, what Allen Robinson did. When I heard about that, I was like, geez, did Roy Williams have a reincarnation in this league? But, it's a win for the Lions, and, you gotta take it. And, I was definitely happy to see the morale has improved with Darrell Bevell kind of running the show now. It seems like the players respect him a lot more. They're willing to play for him a lot more. Now, as for whether or not this leads to them winning more games, I'll probably get into a little bit later, especially with the next game coming up against the Green Bay Packers.
And we'll get to that right now. 4:25 on Fox this upcoming Sunday. Ed, we'll start with you with the analysis and the Viget predicted score, and then we'll go over to Frank with the same things. Ed, go ahead.
The analysis being, this is a 9-3 Packers team that's looking to cinch up the NFC North and potentially get a top seed in the NFC for the playoffs. They have a pissed-off Aaron Rodgers who's playing like his old self once again. We saw him torch this Lions defense earlier in the season. They have obviously and clearly not gotten better as a result. This is a Lions team that's still maybe without Kenny Galladay again, maybe without DeAndre Swift, who knows. Both are questionable, as is Kerryon Johnson. So we may be seeing another game where Adrian Peterson has to shoulder the load. This is a Packers team that have won 4 of their last 5. Their last loss coming in OT by 3 points against the Colts. And this is a team that also has far exceeded, that has at least over 100 yards per game averaged in terms of running the ball. So again, when you look at all of the check marks on the board where it points to, the clear advantage is obvious. It's with the Packers. It didn't matter if this game was on a neutral site, Ford Field, Lambeau, fans, no fans, COVID, no COVID. The Lions are just going to be the underdogs in this, and for good reason. And knowing what's at stake for both teams, to me, I will be extremely shocked if Green Bay underperforms in this game or plays down to the competition. So I'm going to say Green Bay will win by a score of 34-20 because, again, that defense is terrible. I'm going to bump it up because Aaron Rodgers may have no choice but to run it up at some point. So let's go say 41-27. Like, the Lions still tried their best to keep pace, but their defense is too terrible. And with a guy like Rodgers, he's going to go bonkers on them. So my big hit predicted score, Green Bay 41, Detroit 27.
All right. And that predicted score is brought to you by Viget, which influences more and more people to love sports, a social network for sports fans. Enter the referral code STABLES with a capital S and the letter B in the middle. Frank, your turn.
Well, the winning's going to end here for the Lions. I mean, yeah, you got to win over the Bears, but you know what? The Bears are also a dumpster fire. Going up against the Packers, I mean, how many times have we said it? When they faced the Lions earlier this year. Aaron Rodgers is basically going on a kill-em-all tour after how their offseason went. And sitting at 9-3, I know they lost fairly recently to the Indianapolis Colts, but I just think that the Lions defense just doesn't have an answer. Plus, no Kenny Galladay potentially, no DeAndre Swift. This one is probably going to get ugly real quick, and then the Lions might just keep playing hard for Darrell Bevell like they did last week. So my Viget predicted score is going to be Packers 42, Lions 28.
All right. My Viget predicted score is going to be the Green Bay Packers 45 and the Detroit Lions 23. I just don't think the Lions are going to get that close to the 30s. I think the Packers have a better defense. The way they held the Eagles to just, just like 10 points or so or 17. But, yeah, the Packers still held on to win. They almost blew that lead against the Eagles this past Sunday. But I think the Packers are going to win running away 45-23. So that's my Viget predicted score. The Viget app is also available on the Apple App Store and Google Play. So let's go over to the Michigan State Spartans first, and then we'll get to the Michigan Wolverines. We got a little bit of football analysis to do and Viget predicted score predicting as well before we get to the Michigan Wolverines having their big game canceled. The Michigan State Spartans got whooped by the Ohio State Buckeyes 52-12. Rocky Lombardi, 5 for 11 for 33 passing yards and 1 interception in his own end zone for a pick 6 into traffic, the same way Matthew Stafford did in Chicago the day thereafter, plus 3 carries for Rocky Lombardi for just -9 rushing yards. His longest carry was 1 yard. Oh my God, just 1 yard, his longest? Are you kidding me? And then Lombardi got pulled yet again. Peyton Thorne, 16-25 for 147 passing yards and 1 interception, plus 9 carries for 42 yards and 1 rushing touchdown, which is not as horrible as Rocky Lombardi. Now, we're going to go to Ed and then Frank again. Ed, not much to analyze except Rocky Lombardi went back to his old bum self again, and the defense for the Spartans was just nowhere.
No, and I think both that, in fairness, can be attributed to the fact that they were going up against an absolute juggernaut. This Ohio State team has athletes on top of athletes on top of athletes, both offense and apparently on the defense as well. I thought that pick 6 by Garrett remind me of the athleticism that J.J. Watt had to do when he picked off Stafford on Thanksgiving to get that pick 6. It reminded me of that in some instances. But in all, the main point, I think, of this was the Justin Fields showcase. When you consider the fact that he recorded in this game the 12th time that he had at least a passing touchdown and a rushing touchdown, going back to 2019, that is the most out of any quarterback in FBS, even more so than Trevor Lawrence. When you consider the fact that he had 4 touchdowns, 300 yards passing, and 0 turnovers. When you consider the fact that he had on essentially a signature Heisman moment play, and it didn't even involve him throwing a football or scoring a touchdown. It involved him somehow catching up with his running back to throw a lead block. Okay, so that alone speaks to the talent that Justin Fields has, the type of player that he is, that he's willing to put himself on the line for his teammates. Okay, he's not concerned about, trying to look good or being protected as the quarterback. This is a guy who wants to play for his team. And a kid who, quite frankly, might have an outside shot of anybody winning the Heisman, and I think would have had a better chance to up his shot if he were to have gotten a chance to play against Michigan this week. That's just my view. But this was more so about seeing the Justin Fields show up close and personal. And this was, an expected one. Vegas had this one pegged. A lot of people, experts, had this pegged, and for good reason. This was not a scruffy, rinky-dink team like 1998 or a sneaky team that was subtly good like 2015. This was far, far different, and OSU showed that in spades. So, no, this one was not a surprise at all.
No, not at all. Frank, not much to analyze, like I said.
I'm really not sure what much more I can say other than the fact that Ohio State is just on another planet in a different galaxy, even without 23 players available for whatever reason. They were down to their third-string offensive tackles, both of them. And they were also without their starting middle linebacker, Tuff Borland. But I knew that this was going to be a blowout from the beginning because they had Justin Fields still available, and they still had Chris Olave, their wide receiver, as well as their running backs, Master Teague and Trey Sermon. I figured as long as they got their offensive weapons, especially their quarterback, they'll run away with this. And it turns out they did just that. And Justin Fields has my vote for the Heisman. Not just for him scoring his touchdowns, but how many Heisman candidates do you see throw a block like he did on the run play? The only time I've seen that is in high school games. So, not much more to say other than Ohio State's just on a different level than Michigan State is right now.
Right. So, Michigan State plays their last game at Happy Valley against the Penn State Nittany Lions this Saturday at 3:30 on ESPN. Not too important, but we're going to analyze it anyway, and then we'll go with the Viget predicted scores. Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Frank. Ed, go ahead.
This is going to be a battle of the team that's going to be fighting with pride on the line. I think this is what we're going to be seeing in that case. Both teams that have had mediocre to flat-out terrible seasons, both teams willing to get this one over and done with. I think, though, because Michigan State might have a slightly less effective quarterback, which is saying something because it's like a toss-up between Lombardi and Steve Clifford. Both, when you consider the fact that Clifford only has 12 touchdowns compared to 9 interceptions. Man, this is as close a pick 'em as you can get. It's between two bad teams. Now, granted, Penn State has won their last 2, but they've played against one of the worst Michigan teams in years. And even though Rutgers are making strides and improvements, they're still Rutgers. So Penn State, of course, they were supposed to get that win. Knowing all that and knowing how bad the Michigan State defense can be at time, I think this is going to be a chance for Penn State to put up some numbers where it'll be a competitive game, a close game. I could see it go either way. And I really don't believe the spread line of Penn State minus 14.5. They've not done very well at all against the spread. In fact, it mirrors their actual record on the year itself. So knowing that, I'm going to say Penn State will still win, but it'll be a much closer score than people were predicting it to be. So my Vicket predicted score is going to be Penn State 16, MSU 13.
Very low score indeed. And speaking of the spread, I would say -3 instead of -14. Frank, your turn.
I have said this before, and I'll say it again. Penn State, I believe, is better than their record shows. Because in their losses that they had early on, they turned the ball over a ton, especially in the losses to Iowa that was a few weeks back, same week Michigan played Rutgers. And yeah, they did beat a bad Michigan team. They also got a win over Rutgers, but the way I look at it is they performed better in games against common opponents that they have with Michigan State than Michigan State has against said opponents. So I don't think that Penn State covers the 14.5 point spread, but I still think they end up winning. I'm not sure if Michigan State sticks with Rocky Lombardi or if they say, you know what, enough's enough. Let's give Peyton Thorne a shot because he could likely be our quarterback next year. All that aside, my Viget predicted score for this one, I'll go Penn State 27, Michigan State 20.
All right. My Viget predicted score, I'm going to range this. Penn State 24, Michigan State 17. Rocky Lombardi is going to get pulled, and then Peyton Thorne's going to come in again, just like last Saturday. And Peyton Thorne's going to probably get the Spartans to within one score before it'll be too late. Almost like in garbage time, but Michigan State still might look like they have a shot after pulling to within a score, but Penn State will somehow find a way to get that final first down to seal the game, and not go 3 and out. So my Viget predicted score once again, Nittany Lions 24, Spartans 17. So to college basketball, the Spartans men's basketball team now ranked 4th after their win against Duke last week. They beat the Detroit Mercy Titans 83-76 in a game where the Spartans played down to inferior competition the entire game. Detroit Mercy led for almost most of the game, but the Spartans came back and they almost pulled away, and they still won the game by 7 when they should have won by at least 15. And then they beat the Western Michigan Broncos this past Sunday 79-61. They allowed Western to keep it close before finally pulling away late, did MSU. Center Joey Hauser in that game, 24 points, 10 rebounds, and 4 assists. Another double-double for that big guy. Their game, which was scheduled to happen tonight at the Virginia Cavaliers, was postponed due to COVID, and there has been no rescheduling date as of yet. The Michigan Wolverines basketball team, which is out of the top 25 but still undefeated, they beat the Central Florida Golden Knights 80-58. They led by as many as 32. Sean D. Brown, 18 points. Center Hunter Dickinson, 14 points, 7 rebounds. And forward Terrence Williams, 10 points and 6 rebounds. And then they took good care of the Toledo Rockets, 91-71 at home. Hunter Dickinson, 18 points, 7 rebounds. The reason they played the Toledo Rockets is because their game against the NC State Wolfpack was canceled, or postponed, actually. Postponed, not canceled, due to COVID-19. And let's go back to the Michigan Wolverines football team. I forgot to go back to that. Their game at Ohio State, like I mentioned earlier, got canceled because of 15 positive cases of COVID-19. And then when they went back to practice, it kept rising. The number kept rising, and then they had no choice but to cancel their game. But later on, earlier today, Ohio State was approved, and they got the green light to play in the Big Ten championship game after they were originally, by rule, screwed out of it. But now, even Ward Manuel, the athletic director of the University of Michigan, was for that before it was approved by the Big Ten Conference. Wow. So, got to hand it to Ward Manuel. He knows better than this rivalry, at least. We'll go to Ed and then Frank on Michigan State and Michigan basketball, and then we'll go to 5 questions. Ed, you go first. Go right ahead.
My views or thoughts or reaction to this, it's quite simple. This is the best news I've heard regarding Michigan all year, okay? When you consider the fact that they've gotten destroyed in games where they're giving up 400-plus yards, they're giving up 40 points, to Wisconsin and Penn State and Rutgers and MSU. They're getting pimp smacked all across the football field. Now when you add in the fact that, by the way, this is all going on in the middle of a pandemic, students and athletes and teammates are eventually, inevitably are going to catch this disease. It's just no advance or buts to it. There's no way around it. So when you combine those two factors, knowing that there was a mini outbreak in and of itself going around the team and in essence maybe the school, it was a no-brainer to cancel this. Plus, Michigan fans, we have been seeing the same story, song, and dance now for the past 2 decades. You really think the result was going to be much different, if at all, this time? Please, you just spared us from a 3.5, 4-hour torture session. As for Ohio State's chances, now, granted, I might have been taking in a troll of sorts saying that, man, this may screw them out of playing for the college football playoff. But no, the Big Ten Conference, and rightfully so, they did the fair and just thing by saying, listen, obviously, due to circumstances that are far beyond out of any of our controls, and knowing full well the way this team has performed, they've earned their spot. They should not have to risk jeopardizing losing one of their spots to play for the playoff because of a friggin' virus that was, again, out of their control, and their opponent didn't know how to keep things under wraps. So that's not their fault. So I agree with that. Obviously, again, I agree with the decision to cancel the game on multiple fronts. And, I think it's something that one of our co-hosts, Darren, mentioned a while back. It'll be much easier and much easier and better to digest if we just declared the season a wash already. I think I did that the moment they lost to Michigan State. So I've been well ahead of that ever since.
And then we got Jim Harbaugh looking for a return to the NFL because Michigan might potentially fire him after the regular season is all said and done. And then there were also talks between him and Warren Manuel about an extension. That's another thing we got. That's another thing we forgot to mention. Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Frank.
Yeah,
Ed?
it's conflicting reports because, again, it's not flat out saying that. It's not really too much of a certainty, I guess, apparently outside of what Greg Henson may or may not be reporting. Because, again, there was a more general feel, if you read past the smoke and mirrors and read between the lines, 6 years ago, that it was a given Harbaugh was coming here. You would think it's also a given that Harbaugh is gone, but again, it's now so murky. Michigan may not want to buy out his contract, number one. There may be some players, this is different than what we saw in terms of the Lions, where you had so many players come out, former or current, and, bash Patricia or whatever, not saying it's difficult to work with him, players can't play for him. I've yet to really see that or any leaks of that materialize about Harbaugh. And there are some, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've yet to see that level of work really put the school and put the athletic program in the bind to say, hey, man, if things don't go, we're going to have to go in a new direction whether we want to or not. I've yet to see that scenario or situation really take full or force someone's hand in that regard. But I got to say, though, if Harbaugh's thinking an ounce is coming back, he's got to get rid of Don Brown. I don't know if he's got to get rid of Josh Gaddis, but again, you have to consider the fact that the goal coming here was championships. We're talking Big Ten championships. We're talking playing for the college football playoff, and yes, playing for national championships. It also included winning the Big Ten more and beating Ohio State and getting to some Rose Bowls. We have yet to accomplish any of that. And so the fact that you seriously want to consider going through another extension of this, hey, if I get it, if you don't want to pay the money to buy him out his contract and go look somewhere else, hey, more power to you.
Yep. Frank, your thoughts on Harbaugh and college basketball? Sum it all up as quick as you can.
I'll start with college basketball. I mean, Michigan State, I'll start with them. They kind of had a bit of a hangover from the Duke win against Detroit, and it definitely showed with the way they played. Granted, they did pull out a win, and they ended up beating a Western Michigan team and taking care of things there, and they looked a lot better. That one, having the Virginia game postponed, yeah, it stinks, but again, if you got your opponent has COVID issues, then it makes sense. As for Michigan's basketball team, win over Central Florida, good win over Toledo, same deal with having NC State postponed. Hopefully they can get these games rescheduled. As for Jim Harbaugh, my thoughts are this. I really don't get why Michigan would want to extend him, because as Ed said, he was brought here to win championships, plural. How many does he have?
0.
None. Hasn't been to Indianapolis. Hasn't even won the Big Ten. And also hasn't even beaten Ohio State at all. And granted, if they were to play that this weekend, that would have been ugly. And I just
predictably ugly.
There, yeah. Now, I mean, there's been rumors that there's some mini extension, which will be anywhere from 3 to possibly 5 years. But there's a rumored condition that he's going to have to fire his staff, which I don't know if he will. But I'm going to throw this out for you guys. Of all college coaches in Division I who had to fire their staff, the following year they ended up getting fired altogether. There's only one coach who did not. That was Brian Kelly at Notre Dame. Because you might remember in 2016 when they went 4-8, he basically told all his staff, adios, get out of here. And, of course, he still has a job. To me, Brian Kelly is the exception, not the rule. So, will we see Jim Harbaugh bring in a whole new staff, which I'm not so sure that will end up buying him enough time. I think he is going to end up possibly leading on his own, as Greg Henson has mentioned, but only time will tell. I mean, there was even a report of a long-term extension, but they're not announcing it because they want to wait till the athletic department is back in the black in terms of money. There's a lot to process and go through and sort fast and fancy. So this is just a situation we're just going to have to keep monitoring.
Yep. Definitely. I'm not really sure how Michigan State would have a Duke hangover after beating Duke the way they played Detroit Mercy. I'm just not sure.
Well, the fact that the game got that close to begin with lets you know they might have taken this team lightly, which you should never do, ever.
Right. Yeah, I don't think that's a way to have a hangover after, playing down to the competition.
Yeah, and we've seen letdowns happen before after big emotional wins. So those can happen. Frank's not off there in that regard.
Right. True. But anyway, it's time for 5 questions. It's been a long time, like I mentioned earlier. So question number 1, how can the Tigers rebuild with their new manager, A.J. Hinch, at the helm? We're going back to this DSR article recently that Jeff Moss wrote. Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Frank on question 1. Go ahead.
The question being is, number 1, to be more realistic, you get Chris Ilitch away from making baseball operational decisions as much as humanly possible. You let Al Vila do his job, good or bad. Only step in when it's absolutely necessary. And then A.J. Hinch, he is the manager. Let him manage the team the way that he sees fit. Granted, it's all going to be beneficial if you give your GM the resources needed. But again, with the way this rebuild is going, it's going to be another 2 to 3 years before we really start scratching the surface of where we really ought to have been by now.
All right. Frank, what's your answer to question 1?
My answer is pretty similar to Ed's. You let the guys who are in their assigned roles do their job. You don't need Chris Ilitch trying to be Jerry Jones or Al Avila trying to tell A.J. Hinch how to manage the team. And also, you need to develop your guys and make value signings first. Nobody's saying that you got to go and sign a big day player to a $200 and some million deal. Nobody's expecting that. There'll come a time and place for you to do that, but this is not the time nor the place. This rebuild's going to take time, like Ed said, 2 to 3 years before you really start reaping the fruits of your labor.
Question number 2. Should the Lions hire Robert Saleh as their next head coach? Ed, we'll go to you first again, and then we'll go to Frank. Ed, your turn. Go right ahead.
My answer is yes, based on his resume, the opportunities that he's had to coach elsewhere, whether it be at college or at the pro level, especially now, lately at the pro level, knowing that he has seemingly the respect and admiration of his players, which is something we never saw at all, Patricia. And he's a local boy. You know, it seems like a check to me. So if you were to ask me that question, I think my answer would be yes. I would consider hiring Robert Saleh.
Yep. Frank, you would say the same thing, right?
Absolutely, I would. And it's not just because that he's a Dearborn native or that he grew up a Lions fan. It's the fact that he's got the respect of his players. He's worked his way up through the ranks, and he's more than earned a head coaching opportunity. Now, also, it's going to be predicated on the Lions allowing him to do things his way and everybody staying out of his way and letting him coach and do his job. Now, I'm not sure they're going to try and put the 49ers culture in because, like I said, we don't need to do that. But as long as he's there and the players like him and respect him and everyone stays the hell out of his way, all should be good.
All right. Question number 3. If it's not Jerry Reese, who should the Lions hire as their next general manager? This is a bit of a tougher one, but Ed, I'll let you at least think it over, but if you think you've got the answer, go right ahead, and then we'll turn it over to Frank. Ed, your turn. Go right ahead.
Well, that is a much more of a stump. Again, we just went through the Bob Quinn experiment. That did not work out so well. Oh,
I know, right?
Man, oh man, because again, there's not many well-known successful rebuild projects in the NFL. You know, you can't. This is a far different beast than what we would see in the NBA. So it's hard to pinpoint what would be the one to grab here.
All right, that's okay. There are more names to be thrown out there in the future. So, Frank, I don't think either of us have a clue either.
Oh, you'd be absolutely right about that. I know I've said we don't need to do like the Bob Quinn experiment and bring in somebody from New England who wants to run things the Patriot way. And I don't think we need to bring in a complete retread in somebody like Jerry Reese. So this is one you're really going to have to think about. Probably have to look at some names, somebody who's in charge of player personnel, who's got some respect or clout. But this is something that only time will tell.
All right. Question number 4. Guys, listen to this. Could the Lions still miss the playoffs, although they're still in the hunt for a wild card spot? I certainly think that the Lions could miss the playoffs, too, like we've discussed before. Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Frank.
It's a realistic possibility because let's look at the remaining schedule. They have Genghis Khan Rogers Sunday. Then they have to face King Henry, Derrick Henry, and the Titans. Then they got to face Old Man Brady and the Bucks. And then you close the year out against the Vikings. So by that point, you may already be eliminated if you lose one or two, if not all three of those games. But let's say it comes down to that last game of the year, and fate has it, you and Minnesota are fighting out for that last playoff spot. It would be so apropos and so Lions if they get, fight hard throughout all the trials and tribulations, all the perseverance throughout the end of the year, and still manage to goof it up at the end. So if I were to put any money on it, I would say no. They're not making the playoffs.
Me neither. Frank?
I'm saying no because I saw something on Twitter earlier that ranked the NFL teams who had the easiest schedule in the final 4 weeks and who had the hardest. The Lions actually have the hardest remaining schedule because I don't believe they're going to beat Green Bay. They won't beat the Tennessee Titans because I don't think they have anybody who can stop Derrick Henry. And I know that Tampa Bay looks like they're leaking oil and Tom Brady looks like his age is catching up with him, but he's still Tom Brady. And then, of course, ending the season with the Vikings, who may or may not be in this thing. But if it does come down to them winning the final game of the season to get in, I'm just going to play devil's advocate here. Let's say they do beat Green Bay and Tennessee, and they do beat Tampa. Could they potentially win that game against the Vikings? Because I've known Kirk Cousins to turn into a pumpkin in big games. But then again, I've also known the Lions to do SOL things and lose a game that they should win. So if I'm going to just say altogether they won't do it. In fact, I very realistically see them going 0-4 in their final 4 games.
Yeah, me too. And then question number 5. Why should the Michigan Wolverines football team give head coach Jim Harbaugh an extension? My only explanation would be that athletic director Ward Manuel is too much of an ass kisser. Ed, wouldn't you agree on that?
It may be elements of that. I don't think it's going to be as bad as it was in the last days of Jim Tressel when you had the athletic director or the school president, it may have been Guy, the school president, saying, gosh, I hope he doesn't fire me. We haven't reached that level yet. I hope we don't have to. But if it's, let's say, we consider the fact that they don't want to buy out his contract and they're too stubborn to admit that this whole Harbaugh phenomenon so far, it looks like it's going to be a disappointing failure. Since they're too stubborn and prideful to admit that, then no, I don't see them firing Harbaugh, at least at the end of this season.
Frank, your answer.
My answer is I can't think of a reason why they should extend him. But there's also this. It is my belief that Ward Manuel is afraid to fire him. He's afraid to get blood on his hands. He's afraid to be considered the bad guy. And I think it's mostly due to the fact because of the name of this current head coach. This is Jim Harbaugh we're talking about here. The guy who Bo Schembechler absolutely loved. And these are two guys who played for Bo, and there are still plenty of people around the university who look at Bo Schembechler as a deity. And that, in itself, as I've said many a time, is a huge problem. They need to separate themselves from the past so they can move forward in the future. But they won't do that. If this was a coach who had the name of Joe Smith, he would have been fired long ago. But because it's Jim Harbaugh and because he's a Schembechler guy, they're keeping him around. And they won't fire him. I've said that he'll end up walking away on his own. But we'll see what happens with this clown show. I know it hasn't, as Ed said, it's not at the point where you have Gordon Gee saying, are you kidding? I hope that coach doesn't fire me. If Mark Schlissel comes out and says that, then we're going to know that this university is in really huge trouble.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So that's 5 questions, and we'll try to do it again, that segment, next week. So before we go, we want to remind everyone to download the all-new social sports app called Big It, which influences more and more people to love sports. Enter the referral code STABLES with a capital S and the letter B in the middle when you sign up. Available on the Apple App Store and Google Play. download the Viget app and sign up with a referral code STABLES with a capital S and the letter B in the middle. Gentlemen, excellent job as always. That concludes another fine episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast Primetime Edition on Stables Media. We'll be back next week for Ed Smith and Frank Vazner, and on behalf of Darren Weiss, this is Taylor Phillips signing off. Follow me on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at DT2Phillips. Follow Ed Smith on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at EdSmith313. And follow Frank Vazner on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at Frank_Vazner. Thanks very much for listening, downloading, and sharing. And remember, the truth is out there. TTFN, ta-ta for now. Power to the people. Hit them with a high. We rest our case. Stay safe. The Michigan Sports Truth Podcast does not represent or defame any of the teams it covers, nor does it represent or compete against any mainstream media in the state of Michigan. It is also not for entertainment or debating purposes. It only detects, exposes, and reveals honest, actual, and hidden truth, facts, and statistics about them. And it is for every sports fan's own good because the truth is out there.